Well, thank you so much for having me back. I was here last year in December and thought this was one of the best conferences I had been to. So thank you so much, Ajay and Siobhan, for having me. I have a really fun panel. I'm going to start over on that side with William, who founded it's EV, correct? Is the EV, which he sold to Amazon in 2013. I have Richard Socher, who founded MetaMind, who sold his startup, which is image recognition, and sold his startup to Salesforce earlier this year. And then I have Lior Ron, who was at Google, and kind of puts us all to shame if we feel like we've had a productive year. The last conference, because he founded Auto, a self-driving trucking company, in January of this year and sold it to Uber for around $680 million in August. So, a round of applause. So, William, I'm going to start it with you, but my framing question, just to begin, is whether there's something that's unique about AI startups. Is there, as you were contemplating whether to sell or not, was there an advantage that you think was conferred by the acquirer in your space? And take it away, and then we'll go through some others.
Yes, so I think one big advantage of AI startups is just the scalability of the technology. So a large acquirer can take a small startup, take that technology. So a large acquirer may have a huge customer base or a sort of huge reach, and then they can apply that technology from a tiny startup and massively improve what they're doing across the entire business potentially, or have many opportunities to do that. Yep. So I think the kind of value from an acquisition is potentially enormous in the AI space in a way that would be different for other types of business.
Yep. For you, how important was access to data from Amazon?
So yeah, access to data, of course, is also a factor for a lot of machine learning startups. I mean, we were acquired by Amazon for a project, so it was more technology and know-how was part of the thinking there. Yeah. But certainly access to, there was some data that was definitely part of the thinking too.
Okay, cool. Richard, what's your thought?
So for me, my vision for the last sort of 7-8 years has always been to push the state of the art in AI forward through research and then make it broadly accessible. It took me a couple of years in a PhD to do anything in terms of the state of the art. And then I started MetaMind, and at some point we had built a lot of technology. We've done research in NLP and computer vision. We had customers ranging from VRAD, the largest teleradiology provider in the world, and classifying head CT scans for so-called intracranial hemorrhage, brain bleeds, which is running in production. It's a very exciting project, still running, all the way to like classifying images in Twitter and doing question answering and NLP. And so there's a lot of technology that we built for a small startup, and it was basically time to scale up actual marketing and sales, and what better Salesforce to join with than Salesforce.
So, and why so soon, though? Like, why did you try not to scale for longer, and why sell out so quickly?
I guess maybe I'm not super patient, but I wanted to actually get the technology out as soon as possible. And inside Salesforce, there's marketing, so you have access to the Twitter fire hose, a lot of sales data, a lot of service data, a lot of interactions that people have, trying to get their emails answered and so on. So it's what you mentioned with the data, having access to a lot of data, but also having access to that distribution channel is just incredible. Okay. And also to scale up the research in and of itself. It's hard to do research for a super long time with a very large group in a startup.
Definitely. Okay. And Lior, what was the thinking? So were you impatient? Was 7 months too long to work on it?
That's a lot of weeks. We counted in weeks initially, and then we switched to months. I mean, for us, we started Auto really with the goal of accelerating the future. That was the goal to begin with. How can we unleash those benefits of self-driving technology to society sooner than later? So from the get-go, this was an exercise about intense focus and insane speed, and everything was optimized to accomplish that. And many times, it's not necessarily the algorithms. It's really sort of setting up everything around that to be much more simpler and sort of having that unfair advantage. So We chose to focus on highways and trucks because it's a simpler problem to solve. It's easier to map those highways. It's easier to actually get those trucks on the road. We've optimized the culture. With a bias to action. We got the truck on the road after 4 weeks, drove it after 7 weeks on 101, done the first Nevada trip after 12 weeks. So for us, this was always about accelerating, and we were, by definition, impatient. And when we started the discussion with Uber, we've realized that not only we can maintain the focus and be completely independent and continue focusing on trucks, but also just increase the speed by finding more sort of unfair advantages with the Uber partnership. And, two of those are, one, sort of access to vast amounts of data, like Uber is now driving over 1 billion miles every month, and being able to sort of eventually access those photons going into sort of the virtual eyes of every Uber car, and how can we benefit from that is an unfair advantage. And then sort of accelerating the future business model by being able to sort of deploy a commercial transportation network the same way that Uber deployed a passenger network for their business.
But the structure of your deal was a really interesting one. I've never seen anything like it in the startup space, which is that you took a price, but then you also agreed to take 20% of future profits in trucking. Is that right?
Yes, this was really about just maximizing the long horizon and not the here and now. So we've basically took the long view of we're going to continue focusing on trucking and build a business with the help of Uber accelerating that, but versus like doing something now and cashing out, we really wanted to maximize the long-term goals by doing and entering that rev share. And I think one point on acquisitions, and I know you wanted to discuss that as well, many times it's about sort of what the acquiring company mindset and their current stage in their history and development. I think for Uber and for Travis, this was really sort of a moment in history of how he's going to model future acquisitions and how he's going to develop and sort of model internal entrepreneurship. So coming up with creative structures of how to actually model that internal entrepreneurship with real monetary value day by day was, something that made a lot of sense, and I think something that will allow us to continue focus on that mission.
Okay, that's interesting. William, so you stayed in England, is that right, even after the acquisition?
Yeah, so one of the attractive things about Amazon as acquirer is they wanted to keep the team where they were.
Okay.
So they basically invested in Cambridge, England, and turned the acquisition into a big development centre. But I spent about a quarter of my time when I was working for Amazon. I left 6 months ago. When I was there for 3 years, I spent about a quarter of my time in Seattle.
Okay.
So I was based in Cambridge, but I had a desk in Seattle and spent a lot of time there as well. Okay,
and so EV formed the basis for Alexa and the voice recognition software for Echo, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was acquired as part of that project, yes.
Okay, cool. And was there ever any resistance, because there were internal teams working on that, correct? Was that how did internal Amazonians look at you while you were working on this?
So the project was early, fortunately. So it wasn't like some huge battle, and there was an awful lot of due diligence done as well. So there was at the time I resented the sort of many months of very, very deep analysis prior to the acquisition, but that actually made the acquisition, after the deal completed, that made everything run much more smoothly. People had a very good idea about what they were buying, and there were people who were very, very up to speed with what we were. So things went much more smoothly as a result of that than might have happened if it had been more of an impulse buy.
And do you think that your distance ultimately affected the work you were able to do, positively or negatively?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a school of thought that says teams work better if they're all under the same roof, but there's also a school of thought that says you should go where the talent is, and Amazon is very much, I think, in the latter category. They acquire, there's places all over the world now that have teams working on Alexa, and you just have to deal with the time zone differences and. For Seattle and Cambridge, it's like a magic 2 hours a day when you can have a real-time conversation over VC, and the rest of the time you do what you can and use email and have offline asynchronous conversations, and then you also try and fly a lot. So as I said, I spent a quarter of my time in Seattle, and I tried to make up for it when I was, in those sort of 2 weeks every 2 months or so.
Okay. Let's talk about the morning after. Richard, how did life change after you agreed to the sale?
Boy, life is good.
Glad to hear it.
So I'm the chief scientist now at Salesforce, and it is quite an interesting transition going from a pretty small startup of around 15 people to being chief scientist of a 24,000 people software company. And it's been quite humbling. I've been learning a lot, seeing sort of how Mark Benioff runs his company and his culture and his values that he views, and learning a lot about management from him and other folks inside Salesforce. So it's been mostly humbling and very exciting. We just launched Einstein. We had Dreamforce, which is a 150,000 people conference in San Francisco. All San Francisco shuts down. All hotels around San Francisco are booked out. And the keynotes about Einstein, which is our sort of AI initiative that is going to bring AI to, and has started already bringing AI into a lot of different kinds of clouds that we have. So it's been super exciting. I think they've done a phenomenal job. We're actually also still in Palo Alto in our old office. We're sort of bursting out of the seams, so looking for a new office space. But it's been nice. Fortunately for us, it's just a 1 hour drive away, not quite as long as a flight. But yeah, it's been great.
Okay, got it. And Lior, are you given autonomy to, or did you move into Uber's headquarters, and do you kind of feel very much that you're part of this larger behemoth?
Nothing much changed for us. We're still hanging out in our scrappy Soma garage warehouse with all the trucks and all the people. And the rats still go out between 1 and 4 a.m., and they haven't stopped doing that after the Uber acquisition. So we're keeping the trucking part very independent, with our own value, with our own sort of scrappy way of approaching that. What changed for us is we're also now doing cars and sort of those self-driving Ubers. In Pittsburgh, just an hour or two away from here, with the very talented CMU team. And that part, of course, is much more integrated into the sort of bigger Uber company. And for us, we spoke about the Antler advantage, sort of the benefits. A lot of it is also about just the value match and the personality match. Like, what would you do if you were CEO of sort of an Uber or an acquiring company, and will come and say, hey, in 7 weeks, we're going to drive a 18-wheel rig for 120 miles without a driver in the seat on Colorado, ferrying 51,000 cans of Budweiser. You will sort of want to take a pause and think about it. And Travis was like, let's go for it. So, we've been just heads down doing that, and we've just accomplished that last week. So it's just moving faster and independent, and, so far so good.
The attendance at this conference, I think, shows the interest, the growing interest in the field. So were there any concerns that all of you were selling too soon? How do you think about the timing of of selling and integrating with a corporate partner? And William, I'll start with you, because yours was the oldest in 2013.
Yeah, it was actually 2012.
Oh, 2012.
We had a very, very good year in 2012. We kind of launched, we found a pivot that worked. We had, 40 interest from about 40 companies, 40 big companies through most of that year. And when the dust settled, we had a choice. We could have gone for a big financing, and there was a couple of kind of advanced acquisition offers we had. The financing, would have pushed out an acquisition, so we thought, by some time. And the choice of the other two, we chose Amazon, and it worked out very, very well. It was a successful acquisition. So I don't actually have any regrets about the decision that was made. And I think, the financing, I think, would have become an acquisition as well. It was a corporate investment. So I personally have no regrets, but I mean that's partly with the benefit of hindsight of knowing how well things went afterwards. And also we've been going for some time as well. We were 7 years as we'll be going years when we got acquired. So with the 3 years I spent in Amazon, it was a full decade. So again, it doesn't feel premature at all.
When you see the Echo, do you feel like, and all the hype around that product, do you feel like that's something that you could have ultimately delivered on your own?
No. So that required that. I mean, as you say, I'm delighted with how that product went, but a startup couldn't have built that product end to end and made it such a success. That required Amazon's magic. I'm very delighted to have been a part of that. But yeah, no, and that's one of the measures of success is the successful product coming out of it. So.
Absolutely, Richard.
So I think we are all accustomed to seeing phenomenal AI features in consumer applications, right? Google and search, Amazon and selling goods and e-commerce, Uber, we're driving and cars and so on. And we see that, but there are a lot of companies out there that aren't Uber and Amazon and Facebook and Google who have billions of dollars to do this kind of innovation. And so one of the reasons MetaMind was called MetaMind was that I'm very excited about trying to build the underlying algorithms and technology, and my team was to power a lot of different kinds of applications. And so I also think it's not quite as long ago, but we came in at a great time because enterprises are now realizing we want to have this kind of technology too. We need to have it too to have personalized interactions. But the interesting technological question for Salesforce is they have 150,000 different companies who all have thousands or millions of customers themselves. And so whenever we solve a problem, it needs to be solved in a meta platform kind of way so that 100,000 different companies can then use that technology to solve their own problems. So it's a phenomenally exciting opportunity to have impact on that many different companies. I mean, if we just make all of those like 1 or 2% more efficient in either their sales or their services, it'll have like potentially a little impact on the GDP of the United States. It's incredible.
Okay, interesting. And Lior, what's your thought on being too early to sell?
For us, I mean, this was the key question in the end of the day. And that's what took sort of most of the time in the discussions. And I think we sort of hit the button when we felt that this is something that will substantially accelerate the present. It's much easier to ask sort of a national shipper like Budweiser and the state of Colorado to sort of bet their future on the line when you have a backing of an Uber, like compared to a startup. When we felt we can accelerate the present without compromising the future. And in the end of the day, and that's sort of like 1,000 different things using our own brand. We've done that still under the name of Otto, maintaining full independence, having full array of decision-making on anything that has to do with the business, doing the profit sharing mechanism in place from a financial perspective. Once we sort of walked through that process, and it just felt that we're sort of almost and there's always on almost sort of equal footing in terms of maintaining full independence versus joining Uber, then we knew that it's the right time to actually do that.
Okay, I have 2 more questions which I'm going to race through because we're racing against time. Siobhan Zillis actually put it to me in a way that made me laugh, where she talked about never-land startups, i.e. startups that are never allowed to grow up. They're just kind of stuck in perpetual child because they get acquired too early. Do you think that that's a risk to the ecosystem in the AI space, that corporates are so interested in AI that AI startups aren't going to kind of have a go at it alone because they can get such a good price if they sell out at this point? Who wants to take that one?
So I think that's very much dependent on the founders and their willingness to sell. Companies can't force a sale if the startup isn't willing to be sold. But yeah, the AI is such a hot space that quite often companies are willing to acquire for a lot of money, and for a first-time founder, that amount of money can be extremely tempting and result in a premature sale. But with perhaps second-time founders or people that are less motivated by money, they can hold out longer.
Richard, a risk to the ecosystem potentially, or no?
I think, if anything, it's great for the ecosystem. I think Montreal, for instance, just launched their Element AI, right? And so there's so much excitement around deep learning and AI that a lot of incredibly smart people are moving into this field. The ecosystem is clearly thriving a lot. Now, I hope most people who join it aren't just joining it to sell out quickly and start their company. I see some startups who clearly are just going for the acqui-hire. They have zero business plans or anything, and they're just clearly going to get acquired, have a team be put into a bigger company. And even that could make sense for some of the bigger companies to still do these acqui-hires because these incredibly smart teams in the hands of the right distribution channels and so on can be very impactful. But again, for me, it wasn't as much about the money as it was about the impact that we could have and bring the technology to more people more quickly, because now is the time.
So one last question. I'm just going to go through the panel very quickly. If you could give me just a short answer. What's something for people for startup founders who may ultimately get acquired? What's something that you wish you had known, either a question you had asked, or what something, a risk, what something might have been like that you wish you had known, kind of going into the process, or someone had told you? And Lior, I'll start with you.
I think actually tying also to the last question, maintaining full independence and full vision for how to actually bring the technology to market is extremely important. And I think as we go to that space, actually having a plan and being able to get your AI and algorithm actually in a fully sustainable way to the market actually increases your chances of succeeding independently or being acquired, because companies are actually looking for that. So actually mastering your own destiny from day one is extremely important.
Excellent. Richard?
Boy, there are too many things to answer them in the minus 1 minute that we have. I think in the end you have to acknowledge that as a first-time founder you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from them. So as long as you keep an open mind about learning and continuously improving both the state of your company and your own skills, I think you'll be in a good shape.
And William?
I just want to make the point that the impact that you have after the acquisition is something that is very important and something that you look back on. So I think that's often forgotten with sort of large checks being written and acquisition discussions. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you to you three, and thank you so much to the audience.
Thank you.